Great. So hello, everybody, and welcome to our fifth and final session, at least for now. At least for now is probably quite key, of Trailblazers, this series of soft skills sessions that we've been doing throughout the month of August. Today, we're joined by Melissa Hildees, who I'll pass on just a little bit and allow Melissa to introduce herself. But just before we kind of dive in, I really wanted just to kind of cover a couple of quick things, just so that everybody's up to speed and aware, because we do get questions about them coming through each week. And especially with it being the final session, at least for now, I want to kind of ensure that that information is out there and is transparent. So the first bit I want to cover about is the recordings. So as mentioned in previous weeks, the recordings are going to be distributed in bulk after the series is concluded. Thought that was a good idea, just to kind of encourage people to actually come to the sessions. That's a little bit of a selfish means of doing it in one sense, I understand. But coming to but releasing the sessions after the series is concluded, I thought might be more encouraging for people to actually come and be here, so that they're not missing out on the sessions, and then they can see all of the recordings from the great sessions that we've had so far afterwards. So the sessions will be coming out potentially next week, maybe the week after, but it'll be early September. And it shouldn't take too much work to get them out. But all of the attendees who have come along will get a quick email to say the recordings are here, and they can be found on most likely YouTube. And this is where the videos will be located. In terms of the giveaway as well, the giveaway is happening, and there will be a prize draw being done offline. I have decided I will be recording the prize draw, so you can see how the names being drawn. But basically, we'll be doing that off air after the sessions are concluded, because it's based on attendance. So if you've attended all 5 sessions, you'll have 5 entries into the giveaway. If you've attended 4, you get 4, and so on and so forth. But everybody who has attended at least one session will get into the prize draw. And then once the draws have occurred, and there will be 5 prizes, 1 for each week in equivalent, we will be revealing who has won in that video, and also you'll be getting an email to say that you've won and what your prize is. So for this week, we are going to have our session as per usual, and during the time there will be some time for question and answers during the presentation, and also after the presentation has concluded as well. So if you have any questions, please do feel free to share those questions in the chat or in the Q&A button that you should see if you're on your desktop, should see at the bottom of your screen. If not, they will be somewhere if you're on mobile. I'm not quite sure where that button appears on your mobile view, but you will still see that. And as I say, it's been great. I'm just looking at the chat here and I see a really good thing from Kristen, saying that she enjoyed being here and felt that it was particularly welcome as a new admin, which is great. Can't say anything really much better than that, and it's great to see so many people who have been coming, who are new to the ecosystem, new to the community, and really getting something out of this series. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Melissa, and we'll begin our presentation for today. So Melissa, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Let's see if I can share my screen here and get that set up. 1 second. I apologize because I'm a little bit out of pocket today, traveling. And that's the great thing, right, about being able to work this way, to be able to work from anywhere, and makes it a super fun thing to do. Let's see if I can get our faces out of there. I don't know what you all can see. Do you all see the world's shortest job description?
I see that screen, yes, so that should be fine. Okay. Kristen says yes.
Okay, good. Like I say, I'm used to working with 2 screens, and I'm down to 1 today. So I'm excited to be here. And before we even get started, I want to see if we can just take a little informal poll of the folks that are here today. And my question is, do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert? And Mark, you'll have to kind of help me keep track in the chat, but if you'll just put in the chat whether you think you're an introvert or an extrovert. Obviously, you all know, I'm sure, that I'm very, very, very extroverted.
So,
And Mark, would you say you're an introvert?
I would say I'm more introverted with some extroverted leanings, but I would say I'm more introverted. Going from the chat, most are coming in saying introvert. We do have some extroverts and we do have some saying both as well. But see,
Awesome.
actually now it seems to be about 50-50 now. Keep an eye on the chat, but it's
Interesting.
about 50-50.
Interesting. So it's good to know your audience, right? And because I'm an extrovert, I can speak much better to being an extrovert than I can an introvert. But to give you an idea, a little bit about me, just to introduce myself. Actually, you can tell I procrastinate because I need to update this slide. I now actually have 6 certifications instead of just 4. But I have been in the Salesforce ecosystem since about 2010, but I never really got involved until about 5 years ago when I became a founding partner at Hands-On Connect. And since then, it's been an amazing journey, meeting so many different people, getting certified, got my Salesforce administrator certification on the second try, failed the first time. You know, for those of you who do it, sail right through it and pass it the first time, I'm always so impressed because I didn't do that. The same with the platform app builder, took me 2 tries. Nonprofit cloud consultant, I did actually get on the first try. That was one of the very few, right? And have learned so much, met so many amazing people, have gotten involved being able to speak out on things that were important to me. My first presentation as a Dreamforce speaker was, am I on mute? And making sure that diverse voices are heard in the ecosystem. And because of that presentation, followed up, wound up being, I'm now on the board of directors for Amplify. If you are a diverse voice or if you're an ally, you know, welcome you to be involved with Amplify. And just this year became an MVP and was shocked and surprised and amazed and excited to be able to do that and to leverage that position to be able to make more noise, right? Make sure that more diverse voices are heard. And so from the standpoint of what we want to talk about today, literally in 2019, my job description was make new friends. And so that was absolutely the most incredibly perfect job description for me ever. I love people. People are fascinating. My husband gets tickled because I say that, you know, I meet the most interesting people. And throughout the course of 2020, I was really sad that we weren't going places and doing things in person and have the opportunity to meet all those new people that I'm used to seeing. Seeing old friends and making new ones, like the Girl Scout song talks about. But there were so many good things, as Mark mentioned, with the virtual world, that we were able to have folks from everywhere, got to be friends with folks from everywhere. If you know Akash Mishra, who is the nonprofit user group in New Delhi, and he and I got to be friends, and that's where Nonprofit Dreamin' was born. And because Nonprofit Dreamin' happened and happened virtually, I met Mark and got to be friends with Mark. And so it goes on and on and on for those that we might not otherwise have met. So let's see if I can organize myself. So why network? It's kind of a business analyst question, right? Why would we do that? It can be difficult. It can be really uncomfortable if you're an introvert. For me, I love it. You know, I live to network, to get to know new people, to do different things, but it can backfire too, right? And I know there's a lot of fear and misunderstanding in what networking is really all about. So why in the world would we want to network? So some of the reasons, because it's an important thing to do, right? You all may not remember Zig Ziglar, but way back in the day when I was in university, a professor had us read Secrets of Closing the Sale. And that was the first time that I ever considered that a truly successful person was always selling. You may not realize that. I have a colleague that hates sales. She's like, oh, I can never do sales. And I tell her, I say, you do sales every day. She's in customer service and she is selling our company every day just by the way that she works with our customers and does the things that she does. So in a job interview, what are you selling? You're selling yourself, right? So you're always selling, and how you sell is probably the most important thing you can do, right? So if your success in that regard is not that high pressure used car dealer that's made sales an ugly word, everybody hates those, right? But the first contact anyone makes with me regarding our product, the first question I ask is, how can Hands-On Connect help you? Because that is my goal. And that's really what I want to do. And that sincerity, that word of mouth is the best recommendation that you as a person or your product or your talents can have. So that's even a marketing, a marketer will tell you the same thing. You know, word of mouth is the best way. And so that's one of the reasons I like to be a connector, to be able to recommend someone to someone else, to be able to know what your interests are. Everyone in this call, I was excited to see a few people that I already know and a lot of people that I don't know yet. So an opportunity to find out what your goals are and what you've got going on. So another reason to network, I finally this year, you know, I was this year old when I realized that the reason that people pay immense amounts of money to go to a smart university and Ivy League college, why would they do that? I mean, you're going to get the same education if you get a bachelor's degree from Harvard or from Oxford or from Ivy State Community College, right? So why would you pay all that money? It's the networks that you build in college and the networks, the extended networks, right, that you can draw on once you graduate. There's a reason that the good old boy system works. It's all about who you know and not just what you know. So like Sally Krawcheck, if you've read her book, Own It, I'm a big believer in creating our own networks, and our own communities is really what we have done with the Trailblazer community. And you think about the variety of people that you've gotten to know, that you've met, and you may not realize it yet, but you'll realize soon how important that group of people is in your career. And we can't talk about why we should network and not include Mark Benioff. His network is incredibly varied. And I can't pronounce the father of mindfulness's name. Maybe somebody can teach me how to do that. Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a friend of Mark Benioff's. And on the completely different spectrum, Lars Ulrich of Metallica, to no telling who he has on his speed dial. And that's how he is able to get things done that are important and get them done quickly. Can you imagine being able to pick up the phone and send supplies to Puerto Rico in a heartbeat after a hurricane, send masks and personal protective equipment where it needs to be just immediately, because you've got folks on in your friend list that you can contact that quickly to make good things happen in the world. Another excellent reason to network. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know someone who does. And I hope you all can hear this little cartoon. I love networking because I think people are fascinating. And when I mentioned earlier, my husband says, I sound like when I talk about all the brilliant people I meet in the Salesforce ecosystem. If you remember Bugs Bunny in this little cartoon, let's see if we can get him to play here. Oh, he's on mute. Hold on.
Said to my girlfriend just the other day, gee, I'll bet monsters are interesting, I said. The places you must go and the things you must see, my stars. And I'll bet you meet a lot of interesting people, too. I'm always interested in meeting interesting people.
And so every time I say, oh, I met the most interesting person, because I do. A good example, just recent example, I interviewed to be on the partner advisory board for App Exchange. And the gentleman that interviewed me, we got started talking, and he was born in Poland. He was raised in Sweden. He lives in Chicago now, speaks Polish, Swedish, English, Spanish, and German. I thought that was just fascinating, so interesting, and had a great conversation with him. And so, of course, every time I say I meet the most interesting people, that's immediately what comes to my mind. So just
My, I'll
to,
bet you
let's
monsters
stop
lead
him.
interesting lives. I said to my
Interesting lives. Let's see if we can make it go to the next slide. There it goes. So I put this together as a V2 mom originally because there are certain values that really are critical to being successful with networking. And so genuinely being interested in others. When we talk about that used car salesman, in the plaid jacket that everybody hates, it's because he's not really interested in your welfare. I really want to see people succeed. That's the reason that, when Mark asked if I would give this presentation today, I wanted to be able to help Mark because Mark's my friend. So I'm genuinely interested in him succeeding. Building relationships. So not just, sell you a car and be gone the next day, but to continue those relationships, to know what's happening in people's lives and where they are and how they feel. And then to broaden your sphere to make the world a better place, right? Before Salesforce, most of the people that I knew in the world were local to me regionally. And even though I had traveled, I didn't have a way or any impetus to maintain those relationships and to build the relationships across the world. Now I feel like I have friends in so many different places. Every time we talk about going somewhere, I say, oh, I have a friend that lives there. In fact, here where we are in the mountains today, I know that 20 minutes away, there is a Salesforce friend that lives here. So broadening your sphere to understand better, to truly to make the world a better place. So the important question sometimes, right? The hard part, how do you network? That, especially for introverts, seems to be a huge stumbling block. And we need to be sure that that's not the case. So let's talk about how we can actually put some of these thought processes into action. So first of all, don't wait for a membership certificate, right? One of the biggest mistakes that I made coming into the Salesforce ecosystem was imagining that there was some structured criteria for belonging, right? I missed out on so much because I assumed that there were clubs that I wasn't a part of. I was invited to attend a pre-Dreamforce gathering in 2018 for Ladies Be Architects and WIT Devs. And I didn't get in the group picture because I didn't feel like I had joined either one of those groups. Luckily, there were other photos, but you don't have to join everything, but be a part of something, right? So I go back now and I'm like, why am I not in this big picture here with all these fantastic people that you probably know and recognize from the ecosystem? And it wasn't because they told me I couldn't be in the picture. It was because I didn't think I belonged in the picture because I hadn't paid any dues. I hadn't done anything that made me feel like a part. The wonderful thing about the Salesforce ecosystem is that everyone is incredibly welcoming. There aren't any rules. There usually aren't even any forms to fill out. If you're a part of this nonprofit user group, nobody made you fill out a form or declare a political party or anything, and you're a part. You're here today. And I know that Mark would claim you as part of this nonprofit user group. So don't hang back and wait for somebody to tell you that you are a part of a group. Just be a part of the group. Whoops. So be there, right? Show up. I met Charlie Isaacs, and if you don't know who he is, then you need to follow him on Twitter and find him on LinkedIn, because he is one of the most amazing community-minded Salesforce employees I have ever met. I met him at the very first Witness Success. And it was because someone that was a friend of mine introduced me to him. And he was so gracious when I met him. He offered help if I needed it. As it turned out, I was working on a paper for one of my college classes, and I needed a quote from someone. And I emailed him and asked him if he could give me a quote. He emailed me back. He said, let's put some time on the calendar, right? So just because I showed up to be at Witness Success, met him, and have gotten to know him, it's been an amazing part of my Salesforce journey. And the same thing is available to you just by being there, right? So be a part of something that you find interesting. If you're an introvert, that can really make it hard sometimes to meet other people and to get to know other people. One of the best ways that you can do that is to be a cheerleader for someone else. So there's lots of opportunities outside of, you don't have to be like me. You don't have to just walk up to a complete stranger and say hello. You don't have to walk over to the table where someone's sitting by themselves and, start talking to someone off the bat. But someone that you know already may need your encouragement, may need to be cheered on. If you're looking for new opportunities to meet and get to know people, volunteer with Pep Up Tech. They're always looking for folks to help lead classes, to help with office hours, because you probably know something that someone else doesn't know. The Trailblazer Mentorship Program, if you need a mentor or if you're willing to be a mentee. And again, you don't have to wait until you're 13 times certified to be a mentor. You don't have to have any certifications to be a mentor. Someone to share information with and talk back and forth with is a great way to be involved in the mentorship program. In fact, they have just updated it. Eric Dreschfield and I just led a group of mentees. There were about half a dozen, about 6 people, and me and Eric, which was a nice small group. Everybody felt comfortable. You didn't have to be wildly outgoing. We did it virtually. And so we have made new friends once again, and in a very simple and easy way to get to know folks. So methods, right? So here's some other tips and tricks. So the sticker mail swap. I don't know about you all, but for a long, long time, the only thing I ever got in snail mail were bills, and that was not fun. Now all my bills come electronically and most of them are paid automatically and I don't ever see them. So it's not as painful, but it's exciting when you get snail mail now because it's stickers, it's a note. It's an old school sort of thing, but it's something that I learned very, very early on in my career. People like to get mail, especially when it's about them. So if you want to make new friends, get involved in the sticker mail swap. Michelle Hansen helps with that. And she's on Twitter. If you're looking for her, I have her contact information. Ohana Pairs, I know they just started a brand new pairing group. Another wonderful opportunity to get to know someone and get to be friends with someone. There are all sorts of affinity groups out there. So Food Force is one that Sarah Orens and I started last spring when everybody started cooking when they got stuck in the pandemic. And foodforce.org, just trading recipes and sharing what we all love, food, right? Everybody eats. And that's been an exciting and fun thing to do. Knit Force is a group that meets virtually on Sunday afternoon with Judy Son from the nonprofit community. And knitting, crocheting, crafting, whatever you want to do. It's kind of like an old-fashioned sewing bee, right? We all sit around and talk, and it's not just women. We have guys that come too that do all sorts of crafty things and have a good time together. Fit Force, obviously I don't belong to that group, but it's out there, and there so whatever your affinity is, whatever you enjoy doing, there's a group of Salesforce folks out there doing it too. So you can get involved in that way. So when we go back to in real life, and I'm confident that one of these days we really are, right? Sit with somebody that you don't know, right? Sit at a table where you don't know anyone. That's how I met and made one of my dearest, sweetest friends, Vanessa Villagomez. And she was at Witness Success. I didn't know who she was. I hadn't met her. I sat down at a table next to her, and she and I started talking and are great friends. So sit with someone that's sitting alone. You know, I mean, go think back to high school. I was a nerd when it wasn't cool to be a nerd. And so I wasn't at the popular kids table. And sometimes folks would prefer to sit by themselves, but normally they're sitting by themselves because they don't know anybody. And you can go and sit down with them, or at least ask if you could join them. And a great way to start a conversation. So be aware of commonalities, right? If you're familiar with Kevin Bacon and his 6 degrees of separation, you can find common ground with just about anybody. I would honestly dare you to not find common ground with someone after talking to them for 10 or 15 minutes. There's something that you all have in common. And of course, the great thing about the Trailblazer community is we all have Salesforce in common, regardless of what part of Salesforce we're involved in. So let people know what's important to you. Eric Dreschfield does a great presentation on personal branding, and you'd be amazed because it gives a touch point for people to be able to talk to you. I posted just this morning, we saw something on television about bacontoday.com. And of course, what was the first thing that came to my mind was Eric Dreschfield. My husband, who's not involved in the Salesforce community, said, Melissa, you need to be sure that Eric knows about this, and posted that on Twitter. My pearls are part of my personal branding. Llamas, because that's the mascot that we've settled on for our company. And you would be amazed at the sweet notes, the funny videos, the kind gifts that I get that come to me that are llama related, just because I'm associated with llamas. So let folks know what's important to you. Salesforce news, right? So send handwritten notes to check in with people. It's the same thing as kind of the sticker mail swap, but you would be amazed at how much bonding goes on when you talk back and forth with a handwritten note. Even if you can't read my writing, you'll see what that really brings to building your relationships with other people in the Salesforce ecosystem. One of the biggest complaints that I hear is I'm an introvert, right? That's the reason I can't network. I'm an introvert. But if I understand correctly, the real difference between introverts and extroverts is that introverts get their energy from their alone time. That doesn't mean they don't like people. It just means they recharge in a different way. As an extrovert, I recharge being with people. And so when I'm by myself for a long time, I get kind of uncharged, right? And that's why the pandemic has been so tough for me. I've been described as being disturbingly social and energetic. But somehow between social media and the pandemic, it really doesn't matter. So getting to know folks virtually has helped tremendously. And getting to know new people and maintaining those friendships. So as an extrovert, I would encourage you, if you consider yourself an extrovert, to seek out the introverts, make friends with them, find those quieter folks that don't speak up and lend your voice to them. Another complaint that I hear is, well, I don't know anyone, right? So start somewhere. In 2018, I had very few new followers on Twitter, and I never really used Twitter, so I didn't know what to do with it. Now, I know tons of people, and I have almost 6,000 followers last time I checked, and I don't check every day, but people are so interesting. Like I say, Food Force, if you've seen that, started as just a fun way to interact with other folks and to point out the fabulous cooking that people were doing during the pandemic. So find an interest, follow an interest, comment. There are friends on Twitter that I have that I've never met in person, that we've had the most amazing and interesting conversations that you can possibly imagine. So you can overcome those obstacles of I'm an introvert, I don't know anyone. What what is your obstacle? I'd love if you have just a second to maybe put in the chat window, and love to hear the reason that you think you can't network. What makes networking difficult for you? To be able to think about that together and see what new and different ways that we can include next time, right? To help overcome those obstacles. And we'll do some Q&A afterwards. We can certainly talk about some of those. So give you just a minute here. Let me get a drink.
We've got some coming in the chat already. We found ones coming through saying things like, just go pull that up. It being time consuming. Will people like me? Having to talk over people, icebreakers, how to start conversations, speaking in groups, finding that a bit intimidating. Simply just reaching out to people, and there's still more coming through. Really good one I've just seen there from Elizabeth, which I think is quite common at times within the community, but we probably don't necessarily verbalize as much, which is, if I go and speak to someone, will they assume I only want something from them?
That's great. And I, of course, I can only speak for myself, but that's one thing that I've found in the Trailblazer community. And I've been involved, I'm a joiner from way back, and the Trailblazer community is the first place that I have been engaged that is really not the case. It's so much more a collaborative community than a competitive community. We challenge each other, but I don't think folks naturally assume that you want something from them if you're just engaging in conversation, right? If you're applying those things of being sincere, of really being interested in that person. And if they do assume that, that's not your problem. That's, they're the ones that are making the mistake and losing the opportunity to get to know you. And so there are enough people in the Trailblazer community that really just want to get to know each other, that I would never let that stop me from talking to whoever I wanted to talk to. But that's a great, and you're right, it doesn't get verbalized a lot, Mark, and that's very different from a lot of communities that folks are involved in.
Yeah, definitely. And the only bit I would add to that point was that when I see that, I think it's more like we think that other people think that about us, rather than us thinking about them. So like, we're not going to them and saying, "Oh, you just want something from me." It's us thinking, whenever we talk to somebody else, do they think I just want something by going to talk to them? Especially when you've got like really amazing people in the community that almost we can look up to like as heroes, and kind of then go like, well, if I go talk to them, do they just go, "Oh, it's just like, you're one of my heroes," that kind of hero complex side of things.
Yes.
And I think that's part of it.
Yep. And so, and I will tell you, because I see the chat really ramping up, and I'm hoping that, Mark captures that chat for us, because I'd love for you to share that with me, Mark. And feel free to reach out to me. Twitter's probably the easiest way, just direct message me on Twitter, and I'm happy to continue this conversation anytime offline, because it is important. And I think it's important for you all to really be successful in your careers in the Salesforce ecosystem, to dispel some of those notions that may be holding you back, right? So we want to be sure we don't miss any of those. So one other thing I want to talk just quickly about, from a perception standpoint, right? Which is another important part of, I know a lot of people, perception is, what's the right way to put this? It's not important what other people think, but sometimes perception becomes reality, right? And my team at my company thinks that I have everyone on my speed dial. I mean, if it has to do with Salesforce, they will literally ping me and ask me to work my magic, because I don't know everything, but I know people who do. And that is a great measure of success, right? So all of that is to say that the vision is very simple, just to be able to measure your success in networking, right? Are you growing? I mean, like I say, I got to be on the board of Amplify. I taught with Pep Up Tech. I've had invitations to speak. I'm growing myself personally. I'm learning so much. Everybody I interact with teaches me something. And there's give and take. Mark asked me to speak with this series. A friend of mine here in the States and I are putting together a series on nonprofits and what's the difference in metrics and impact. And so consequently, I've asked Mark, to be on one of those panels to talk about how his organization measures metrics and measures impact, right? So it's that give and take as you learn together. And then the deeper relationships. So in 2019, I got to visit people all over the world that were already friends that became even better friends. This year, I was thrilled, talk about, hero worship, Mark. Trish Perkins, who is an amazing Salesforce consultant, was traveling, came through. She and her husband stayed the night with me and my husband. We had the best time just talking. We worked on a new app together for several hours. We had dinner together. It was an amazing and wonderful time to deepen that relationship and get to know each other even better. So my contact information is here. Feel free to connect with me. Like I say, I would love to have more conversations offline. I cannot tell you how much I value each and every one of you just for being here today, for giving me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you. And I would love to get to know you better and know what makes you tick and what your goals and ambitions are. And I've got some resources here. I'm sure that, like I say, Mark will be sharing the recording. I'm happy to share these with you as well, some of the things that I mentioned, but there's so many ways that you can go about networking and making networking work for you. So I appreciate it. I'm happy to take any questions, have conversations. I'm not sure how we're doing on time, Mark, but I can unshare our screen and have whatever conversations, questions, what I can do here.
Well, apologies, right? You probably just have my dog barking in the background. You decided you wanted to have a play there. but no, that's all really, really great. Thanks, Lisa. I'm just looking to see. There's no questions in the chat or in the Q&A yet, but please do feel free to post them. Or like we've done in previous weeks, if you have a question want to share, feel free to raise your hand and we'll actually allow you to speak and let you talk and ask the question verbally, obviously, if you want to. So feel free to raise your hand and ask in the Q&A. I suppose one question I'll probably throw out there, and this is something that means that's when will be the next session. I don't know yet, but we'll have a look at that. Hopefully we can do some more from these. I'm actually in a bit of a change in terms of like what I'm doing in terms of career and things like that. So there might be a little bit of time before I fully figure that out. But hopefully we'll continue with something going forward. Yes, Adriana asked, where can we watch sessions we missed? Yeah, if you missed it, recordings are going to be shared. People who've registered and signed up will get an email to say where the recordings are and where they can be accessed, but it will probably be on YouTube, most likely. So just having a look and see if there's any more. But I suppose one question I think I'll throw out there while we're waiting for questions to filter through around the presentation is, how big of a difference do you think it is with, say, the way networking has been over the last year because of the difference in pandemic? I know you, so much more of an outgoing person, much more extroverted. But on my side of things, I'll be honest and say, like, I've actually found the virtual side actually be a bit more liberating and free, because if I'm there in person, will find that a bit more difficult, not because I don't like people, but because I'm introverted myself. But I found the online space so liberating and free, and then I've actually gotten to meet some really amazing people this last year. So I just wonder, like, how do you think that kind of, have you got any thoughts on like how like the pandemic and maybe has affected networking either for worse or for better?
And so that's a really interesting question, Mark, because so I don't know if you know Nadina Lisbon. She's one of the MVPs and is on Platform Power Hour. And she said, I always thought folks that just kind of hung in the background, you know, on virtual calls and didn't say anything, didn't turn their camera on. I always like the lurkers out there, you know. I've watched too much BBC detective shows. There's always somebody lurking, right? And I have found out because of you, because of Nadina, because of those folks who are not as confident just jumping right into a conversation, that's really eased their entrance into networking, to be able to be that lurker, you know, to sit in the background, just to listen, to kind of get a feel for the room and for who's there and who's talking. And I'm glad. So that's a great thing, right? With Nonprofit Dreaming is a great example of something our team is really struggling with whether to go full blown in person next year or to remain virtual, because, you know, we had over 1,000 attendees in a virtual setting, people all over the world. We're not going to be able to recreate that in person, but there's something about being in person that's important. There's something about being able to do it virtually. So the team is really looking at how do we hybridize, right? How do we have some folks in person and some folks virtual and make that all work together? I'm going to be really interested to see how Dreamforce works this year, because I think that's what they're trying to achieve. You know, there are several of us that are going to be there in person in San Francisco, and everyone else is going to be virtual. And it will be interesting to see how effective that is. You know, I would love to come back to you all a month from now after Dreamforce and say, you know, what was it like? Because when they first came out with Dreamforce being 100 hours of video streaming, I'm like, oh no, I can't do Netflix for Salesforce. You know, I got over binge watching after 21 seasons of Midsummer Murder. You know, I was over it. So I don't know how engaged people can be virtually. And I think that's, you know, and how engaged do you want to be virtually? So it's a great question. It's a brave new world. It's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. And I think just add the introverts 2 cents on that. I think it's, as I said, it can be really, really beneficial for those who are more introverted to actually do stuff online, do stuff virtually. Because it's, when you look at what the introversion, extroversion spectrum really is, for a lot of introverts out there, it's not like a fear necessarily of being around people. What it is you find like maybe the environment's more draining, or the travel to get to places more draining and things like that. It's a lot of stuff outside of actually being with the people.
Yep.
And also big crowds can be part of it. As an introvert, again, it's more common that you will have a smaller group of really close friends than having like hundreds and hundreds of friends. So you'll have like a select group of people that you can really turn to. But I think the virtual space is really good for people who are introverts, but at the same time, just looking from a mental health perspective, people might not won't necessarily know unless you've read up about me, but I'm actually qualified as a mental health first aider. And one of the things that comes up very often when you look at mental health is actually the benefits of actually having an actual conversation with somebody. So something we discussed in face-to-face. So you need a bit of balance in that side. So there's a bit of both in that regard. But as an introvert myself, I've loved the virtual space. But at the same time, I also want to see people face-to-face in some capacity. It's getting that balance right, I think. And I think that's going to be the real thing with the virtual side of things going forward. Because you can sit as much as you like on your at your home on your PC, but eventually you do get tired of even sitting on your PC for like 20 hours a day, especially if you see in work 8 hours a day and you're on video calls all day, and then going to virtual events, it can be tiring. It also depends on the event as well. I know on who's there. If you, but I don't want to like talk too much about it, because we do have some questions coming up. So
Christian made an excellent point about virtual breaking down the barriers that in-person sessions can create. And that's a struggle for me, because I have been very privileged to be able to travel. And of course I have a company that funds some of that travel. And because I have a good salary with what I do, I have the personal means to be able to do that, but not everyone does. And not everyone, I know. So Akash Mishra, and I don't think Akash would mind me sharing this, but when he tried to come to Dreamforce 2 years ago, because he lives in India, he could not get a visa to come to Dreamforce. And which seems so unfair. I mean, I think, why in the world would anybody not want Akash to come to the US to visit? But I know that there are those barriers out there. And I've learned that, through the pandemic and meeting folks from other part of the world. I know that the European Union right now is looking at not letting US citizens come to the EU again. And I'm like, oh no, please. I know I don't blame you. I wouldn't want us either, but to be able to travel and to do those things. So I don't want anyone not to be able to accomplish the things they want to be able to accomplish. So that makes it a really hard decision, right? What I want versus what is really good for everybody. So I think that, like I say, it's a huge conversation to have. And whether you're an introvert or not, there are a lot of other reasons that virtual is helpful.
Yeah, totally. I can completely understand it. I'm sure Akash won't mind me saying it as well, but I can completely understand with that. We were talking before we went on air about Dreamforce, and just I just mentioned from a UK perspective, it's going to cost around about £2,000 to £3,000 approximately for a Brit to come over the Dreamforce.
Right.
And that's not really accessible necessarily in every industry, particularly in the non-profit side, because you maybe just don't have that kind of money lying around, or you'll have to save up for like a year or 2 years to do it potentially, especially as well when you have things like family and all these different things in life that make you have to spend more money. But Rohan, I'm gonna see if Rohan is free to talk, because we do have some questions in the Q&A, but Rohan's got his hand up, so I'm going to see if Rohan is available to talk.
Yeah. Hi, Melissa and Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Rohan.
Yeah. So I have one question. Like I see many people around me having tremendous untapped potential, but are just afraid to take the next step. So how I can encourage others to push them to get out of their comfort zones? Like, it is one thing to get myself out of the comfort zone and do the efforts, but how to encourage and inspire others also to do it as well.
So I think one of the best ways to do that is to just encourage them, right? So whether you're on, encourage them with social media, and I'm sure Mark realizes this, but as soon as he and I became, connected on Twitter, everything that he said, I started retweeting, just because I have a larger following than he does right now, and his will catch up. But it was a way to make sure that people knew the things that Mark was doing and what he was out there and up to, and to help promote him. And I don't know, Mark, did that push you to get out of your comfort zone, to be encouraged that way? Or maybe you're like, stop, Melissa, stop.
No, on that side of things, I think it helps certainly to kind of open up more doors, to kind of get to know people. Or things I've had a couple of people who have connected with me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and they haven't said so in the messages, but I kind of get the sense just from looking at who they're friends with, that the likelihood is they've connected with me because they know you, because your name crops up on, like, when you see on LinkedIn connections, you see the mutual connections, and your name comes up like all the time on those lists. So I think that's kind of one of the things that quite happen. But to Rohan's point and to Melissa's point as well, I think one of the biggest things with helping others get out of comfort zone is, I guess you could call it having allies or having like people who've got your back in those things. Again, from the introvert perspective, sometimes you do need someone to kind of like stand behind you, always like give you a little bit of push and go, you need to go talk to this person, go say hello. Because sometimes as an introvert, you might just not do it. Even though there's a big part of you that probably wants to, but you might feel a bit kind of intimidated, things like that. And sometimes you just need somebody to give you a very polite but loving tap on your back and go say hello. And that can be done on social media as well. But yes, that's a really great question.
Challenging each other, right? That was one of the things that with the Salesforce UX designer certification, that was brand new. And I took that early on and passed it. And so Michelle Hansen and I just started challenging people. I mean, literally calling them out on Twitter and saying, okay, we know you know this, take this certification because you're going to pass it. And that's why I say it's collaborative, it's not competitive, and we do challenge each other. So it's not a competitive situation. It's, I did it, you can too. Come on, do it.
Indeed, yes. And it's on my to do list. I've been told I've got 2 of ones to complete first. But again, that's a bit more of a story for off air. But yes, but thanks for your question there, Rohan. I'm going to go through the Q&A now, because we do have officially 5 more minutes left, but we've got 4 questions in the chat. So we'll try and see how we'll get through them. Yvonne was the first one in, I think, with a question. So I'll go over one first, because I think that's actually quite a good one, which is, how do you manage your time with so many connections? It is to prevent over, I'm not sure what it means by it, but it's like, how do you manage your time with so many connections coming, i.e. connecting time with people, maybe like someone on social media that you mentioned before, versus actual working time? Yes, so I think that's quite a good one, because sometimes we can spend so much time connecting with people that we might not actually do our jobs.
Well, and I know that I am, again, it's one of those things of being very privileged in my work, because what my work is focused on is marketing, sales, the strategic partnerships. I manage our partnership with Salesforce. So the more people in the Salesforce ecosystem that I know and can be friends with, then the better I can do my job. So, and you'll see if you follow me on social media, generally I post first thing in the morning and last thing at night, because during the day I'm doing whatever my actual work is, right? And then check those social medias, Twitter especially, unless somebody pings me about something, in the morning and at night. You would be amazed. So with, almost 6,000 followers, and probably some of that is that, I'm afraid to talk to somebody. I don't get a lot of direct messages. I don't get a lot of direct requests. And it's kind of, I don't know, maybe I hope I'm very approachable, because I intend to be. And I would welcome hearing from any of you individually. Had a young man a couple of weeks ago who, requested 20 minutes of my time just to chat. And I said, sure, of course. And come to find out, he's very involved in, not omni-channel, what's the new one that they bought from Velocity. And anyway, but every time it comes up now on my radar, I think of him and I try and connect him with opportunities to be involved with that specific focus point. So I don't know, it doesn't seem like that difficult a chore. It may be if your job doesn't directly involve talking with other people. I mean, if you're supposed to be coding for 8 hours a day, which that would just be the death of me. But if you're talking to other people and they're attending things like this, right? So, I look at this list of people that are here, and I know people that are here, and I'm glad to see them. And I feel like we've connected, even though we really haven't spent a lot of one-on-one time together, but we will. And I will be at Dreamforce in person. I will be at Florida Dreaming in person. And I don't know, it just doesn't seem to take up that much of my time, maybe because I enjoy it so much, right?
Yeah, that's great, Melissa. Thank you. And as well on that point as well, I think one thing we sometimes have a difficulty necessarily splitting away from is in terms of work. Like if you mentioned that like if you're stuck behind like a keyboard for 8 hours a day writing code, there's things around like say like again just going back to like the mental health side of things. There's lots of different talks going on and has been for quite a while now about work-life balance, well-being in work, and those kind of topics. So you've got to ask yourself: is sitting behind, using that example again, 8 hours behind a keyboard writing code, is that the best for someone's mental well-being? And I'll be honest here, chances are, long term, it's probably not, because you need that personal interaction. But again, it's about finding this balance. So like these kind of sessions here, in my mind, I don't see a reason why workplaces couldn't classify this as part of your professional development. And you're doing an hour once a week for 5 weeks as part of your professional development, because these are important skills that we're covering to learn. But as well, it gives you that opportunity to connect with people and meet online. But yeah, again, it's finding that balance, also ensuring that you're doing what's right for you in terms of your health and your well-being. Because we all need connections with people. Again, some people need it more, some people need it less, but we all need at least some connection with people. And it's finding that balance that's right for you and doing that. And your workplaces in an ideal world should be enabling you to do that, because at the end of the day, a healthier employee, a happier employee, results in being a more productive employee, which has benefits to things like the bottom line and all this kind of stuff. So if you've got employees in your company who are much better, much happier, then they're going to benefit your company. So why not give them those opportunities, especially if it's going to increase productivity at the end of the day?
I think you make a great point, Mark, that I need to include in my presentation actually is, and point that out better, is that professional development, right? So, because if you can do your job faster and better because you know people, then that is important, right? So to be able to, ping Amnon Cruthey or Rob Cowell and say, I'm stuck, how do I do this, right? That makes it so much easier and better. I mean, I don't know. I would much rather do that. And that's what I do. I do that rather than dig around in self-help somewhere trying to find the answer to a question when I can get a human being to actually help me with something.
Yeah, absolutely. And frankly, especially when like half the time their answers are going to be a bit better than what you find in the help documents. The help documents are great, by the way. I'm not knocking the help documents, but oftentimes I find the help documents are so technically jargon worded that sometimes it's much easier for an actual person to give the answer than the help documentation. But that's another argument for another bit. So I think obviously, yes, that's Ron's mentioned that. So I've got a question from Akib, and hopefully we'll not keep you too long, so we have three questions left in the chat here in the Q&A. Akib mentions it's very difficult to network given that I don't have certifications or much experience with the Salesforce platform. Oftentimes when a newbie tries to network with people, they seem to think it's just to get a job. What would you suggest is best to provide value to the ecosystem and network effectively for newcomers? I'll quickly mention before I pass over to Melissa, and the point is, and there's like, and hopefully Melissa will agree with me here, but your certification or official experience should not really affect how you can connect or network with people. I personally, for me, I don't give you stuff if you've got 0 certifications or 20 certifications. I care about you as a person, as an individual, and also we've all got to start from somewhere. I've been an admin for 5 years and just got certified for the first time this year. So there's those two sides to it for me. I don't think the certification experience should play an issue with how we connect with other people. But Melissa, what do you think on that question?
I agree. In fact, I think the people that really enjoy getting to know other people, I'm always amazed. I don't know where people work. I get to be friends with people. I don't know what their certifications are. I don't know where they work. I don't know what they do necessarily. Obviously I mentioned Amnon Kruvy earlier, and I don't know where he works. I don't know how many certifications he has. I know that I had a question one day on Twitter, and he said, I'd be glad to, get on a call with you and help you work through that. And that was what was important. And if I were going to, in fact, I just hired someone, Kathy Waterworth has just come to work for us. And she, before I even considered, asking her if she'd be interested in the job, I didn't know what certifications she had. I had to go look them up. But I had spent time with her, getting to know her in Ohana Coffee, right? So, and which Ohana Coffee is nothing about Salesforce necessarily. It's just a whole bunch of Salesforce people, they get together on Friday morning. So I don't think any of that is important to the networking field. I think getting to know them, and then somebody that already likes you, because soft skills, and that's the whole point of Mark doing this, right? You can learn hard skills. Anybody can learn those hard skills. The soft skills are harder to teach and usually more important to an employer than the hard skills are.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like as well, like hard skills are probably easier to teach than soft skills. In one sense, I think soft skills you can certainly do like what we're doing here, providing sessions, things like that. But more soft skills come from, in my opinion, experience actually doing that. It's like, how are you going to learn how to be a good teammate if you've never worked with a team in your life, for example? How are you going to learn good communication skills if you don't talk to anybody? I know the guys, I know those sound like very simplistic answers, but I think most of the time with soft skills, it's the skills grow by doing them. I think there's a lot of truth in that old cliche of practice makes perfect, and I think that's very true with soft skills. Yeah, we've got a couple of questions in here from, hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Mangash. And it says, so I'm not quite sure, let's see the point, or the direction of this question is, but it's talking about icebreaker questions. And so it sounds like from the question that in Mangash's experience, sounds like that icebreakers aren't viewed well. So the question reads, we can't ask icebreaker questions when there is a group and the meeting is supposed to be work related with entirely unknown people. How can we connect with these people afterwards for the long term? Is it selfish to make connections only with the people of quote unquote value? I'll put that in air quotes. On the icebreaker questions, I don't know why you can't do icebreakers in a work meeting. Sometimes they actually are really fun, and it actually can, as the cliche with it goes, break the ice a little bit and make people more open to conversation. So I don't see why you couldn't do icebreakers in work meetings, but again, depends on the organization.
I think it depends on the number of people in the meeting too. So in fact, I had thought about that today, because icebreakers are, at least they're fun. One day we did, what's your favorite dessert? Which was fascinating to be able to ask, what the favorite desserts were. But in this meeting, we had 40 people. We would have spent the whole meeting doing the icebreaker, right? Yeah. So that didn't seem to make much sense. In fact, so optimal to actually get to know people in a meeting usually is about 10 people. I think that's about the right number of folks. That was one of the things we tried at Nonprofit Dreaming, was to have those small groups where it was really just a conversation and everybody didn't have to talk. But what I would suggest in some of these meetings like this, if someone asks an interesting question, if someone says something that you find interesting, you don't have to get to know all 40 people in this meeting, but pick a couple that said something or asked questions that you could relate to, and, creep them a little, find out their Twitter handle, go hunt them on Twitter, and just reach out to them and say, I really appreciated the question that you asked in this meeting, and that would go for any work-related meeting. That doesn't matter whether it's incredibly technical or if it's something like a community meeting like this. And I know if you said that to me, if I were an attendee and you said, Melissa, I really appreciated what your question in this meeting, that would be a great way to start a conversation with me, to get to know me. And so don't be put off by that. That's that connection, right? That 6 degrees of separation. Maybe you can say, oh, you met Charlie Isaacs. I met Charlie Isaacs. And that's the reason I try and relay some of that more personal information. The fact that I'm in the mountains. I mean, I'm not a beach person. I'm a mountain person. So just to reach out and connect that way.
Yeah, that's great. And I think kind of what we're saying here fits into the final question we've got in the Q&A, which is also from Mangesh, which is, do you think social media like Twitter, LinkedIn are better alternatives than in-person meetup where we get to connect to more people in a short time?
And so for me, Twitter has been the way to maintain those relationships and grow those relationships. Usually, and of course, I know it's kind of a different world today, but I would meet people in person at, Dreaming events or at Dreamforce, but then continuing and maintaining and growing that relationship would happen on social media. I have, on the other hand, had it go the other way around. Alex Carroll from Indiana is one of those folks that I got started talking to on Twitter. We had similar interests. He really became an important part of Food Force. And then when I was in Louisville, Kentucky, he was there too, and we got to sit down and have lunch together. So I think it can work either way. It's a great way to continue those conversations and maintain those relationships.
That's great. And we did have a hand up, but the hand's gone. So Cynthia's got a hand up. I think considering the time, we might try and make this the last question, but Cynthia, Cynthia's hand's gone. Okay, so Cynthia, I'm going to try and allow you to talk and see if you want to ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi,
Yes.
Cynthia. Yes.
Hey, Melissa, how you doing? I don't have a question. I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what you were saying about being able to, based on social media, then versus meeting in person. So for me, pre-pandemic, I've developed relationships on Twitter. And for me, my goal at Dreamforce was to actually try to see how many can I meet in person to see if we actually, even though we actually vibe on social media, can we actually vibe in person to really form that bond. So that's my take on things. But I think it also works in person the other way too. But for me, I think as an introvert, for me, it was more of starting off on social media, then forming that relationship, then say, okay, I want to really meet this person, meet this person in person.
I love it. And I'm so glad to see you here, Cynthia. I'm so encouraged. She's one of my sweet friends that I've made on Twitter and with Pep Up Tech and working through some of those volunteer opportunities together. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Well, thank you very much there for your question, Cynthia. That was absolutely a really great point. But yeah, I mean, just to kind of close on that social media point again, my opinion on this kind of stuff, it's about finding that right balance. It's like, and also there's on the social media side, there's also a bit of a practicality behind it. So like, for example, how can I stay in contact with Melissa, for example, someone who I've kind of gotten to know over the last year and is one of my favorite people within the whole ecosystem. But we're in different countries, so it's not as if I can just like say pick up a phone and ring all the time, or I can't like kind of say like, let's say go for a coffee and arrange for that. We would have to actually plan that and say like, well, I'm in Alabama, and how that kind of side of things works. So that's kind of side of it as well, whereas social media can actually really cross that bridge really well, because you can connect with people, you can do things like this, where we're having like say a more of a video call, and have almost replicate to some degree a bit of an in-person experience, because we're actually seeing each other face to face, but we're doing it in a way where we can actually do without being in the same geographical area. So there's that side. And I think social media is a really great bridge between in-person and not in-person communication. But yeah, that's kind of what I would add to that about the social media side. But yeah, and I'm just looking through. I can't see any more questions or anything in the chat. But so just want to say a really big thank you to everybody who's come. It has been a real privilege to be able to run these sessions over the last 5 weeks. And as I say, hopefully I'll be coming back to the drawing board in terms of like how to maybe do more of this kind of stuff going forward, because I think there is a need in the community for these kind of sessions and these kind of events going forward. So when we finish the call, you should get a survey link, but it'd be great to see kind of like what you think about that, and let us know in the survey what you think about that. And Melissa mentioned it, I'll mention it as well. More than happy to connect on LinkedIn, on Twitter. So come and find us, and if you want to talk to me about the future of these sessions, come find me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. More than happy to do that. Again, the recording will be shared probably within the next couple of weeks. Just looking for the chat now. So much love coming in for the presentation for the series. So again, just thank you. As I said, the recordings will be shared probably within the next couple of weeks, just to give me time to actually ensure everything's fine and sort out. And I'll also, as is mentioned at the beginning, we'll be recording the giveaway, and we'll be announcing who's won each of the prizes for that. So again, just want to say a really big thank you. And with that being said, I'm going to end the recording here. And again, to say thank you, and hope to see you all again soon.